So, Sheriff, earlier this year, as part of a national effort, you were appointed by U.S. Attorney William Barr to head a working group on mental health and how it affects public policy, particularly when it comes to the challenges it creates when fighting crime. That was about 3 months ago, give or take a few. Tell me, how is that effort going? Give us an update.
Well, it's going great. Over this last 10 years in Albuquerque, you've seen an upsurge in several social issues, to include crime, homelessness, substance abuse, mental illness. I feel honored to be able to be part of the working group that they feel is the most complex. That came out from the commission itself. It's been a huge, daunting task for the group to bring everybody together during this pandemic because the ability to communicate. But we've literally sat there through all these hearings and listened to all these subject matter experts, listening to best practice. And for me, it's an honor to be able to sit there and at sometimes even listen to where Bernalillo County is as far as how far-reaching and how advanced they are in some of these areas. But there's always room for improvement. So being able to actively listen in on these hearings and listen to all these experts and all these great minds come together to figure out what this report's going to look like. At this point, it's about 45 pages. And they cover a bunch of different topics, and it's being able to help manage that effort is an honor.
I can imagine. And you use the word complex. I would imagine anytime you're charged with looking more closely at things like homelessness and substance abuse and mental health, there's a lot of crossovers there.
Yes.
And that must present a challenge in and of itself.
It does, and they often speak about that. They don't ever talk about mental illness in itself. They talk about all these things crossing over, and sometimes all three of them are existent with a person's personal situation. And so that makes it very complex. And it's trying to figure out how to best provide a service and best provide help for these people so we can help them through these sufferings that they go through.
You talked about how people are actually starting to look to Bernalillo County and some of the things that the Sheriff's Office has implemented here as some of the best practices that are coming out of this. That must give you some good feelings about some of the things you've done here on the home front.
Yes, it makes me proud of the agency, proud of the people that are making the effort and actually take it very serious. These things that happen here, we've been dealing with for decades, mental illness. We've had incidents that have occurred here, but what's come out of these incidents is that we've learned from them. And for the most part, we've created a crisis intervention training, mobile crisis teams, the LEADS program, which is a law enforcement assisted diversion program that allows people to take a different avenue on some of these lower level crimes. The fact that we have school support deputies that are offering children help with substance abuse when their families are facing those type of crises and hunger issues and other type of things that impact children. And we want to be proactive on the front end instead of waiting till they graduate and then we're dealing with them on the back end in the criminal justice system. So for us, we're always looking for the most progressive and advanced ways to help people and service them. And so it's an honor to be able to think about these type of things and implement them into policy.
And then share them with
Yes.
other people.
Absolutely.
And you talk about, the things, these are things that you just mentioned that the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office has put into place that now the rest of the country are starting to pay attention to. The mobile crisis units, some of the things that you've done locally. Those are groundbreaking things that now they're taking notice of.
Yes, they are groundbreaking, and it's exciting to know that we're looked at as a agency that's a leader in these areas, and it's exciting for our people, and it's stimulating for us to want to continue to think about these things. And so many great minds here in Bernalillo County, and so many concerns here is that we need to take advantage of when we're listening to these people, and when we have the opportunity and we can budget for it, is making these things a reality.
Oftentimes it's said that who we are now is prompted by where we were then. There's an incident in your past, and it happened exactly 26 years to the day, practically, when you were, I would imagine, a young deputy working with Lieutenant Zabrava of the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office at the time, who was serving a mental health order and was killed in the line of duty. How has that shaped, tell me about that incident and how it may have shaped some of the things you're doing now and the importance that you place on mental health.
Well, from a personal and professional standpoint, I was working for Lieutenants of Bravo, so there was oftentimes I had conversations with them as I was going through school, and he was encouraging me going to school, and we had personal conversations. But the fact that he was killed and I was there during that time assigned to that unit was impactful. But the one thing I will tell you is that you never want to, what you want to do and take away from an incident is learn from it. And we don't want that incident to be in vain, so we wanted to make the most of that. So there's a lot of things we took away from officers' safety issues, but there's also things that we took away from the mental illness pickup orders that we were serving at the time. And so I believe that some of those things that were evolved from there were the crisis intervention training, the MCT training that we're doing now, and some of the other things that we look at in terms of how we're keeping people safe, but more so dealing with the people that are actually mentally ill and how we can serve them. So that takeaway was major, and it continues to be something we take very seriously, and that we're looking at creating and making better for the people we're serving, but also making it safer for our deputies.
Sure. That must have really impacted you. Do you think about it often, especially as you go through this, the appointment that you now serve as overseeing this commission on mental health? Do you think about what happened 26 years ago?
Well, I think, with Lieutenants of Bravo, some of those conversations I had to do with were inspiring to me were like about my education. So now I'm inspired in terms of applying what I learned and me being in this position to advance the department policy-wise, practice-wise, and then also what we can do to implement it in the department. And so for me, I'll always be inspired by those conversations, by my position now, to create a safer place in these situations with mentally ill people.
So his death during that time, even though we know more now about how to handle these kinds of challenges, both for the mentally ill and serving them, but also protecting deputies when they have this kind of interaction, but his death has certainly not been in vain.
No, it hasn't. We've learned a lot. I learned a lot when I was out in the field and interacting with those type of people. It takes a special type of person. It's a very complex issue. You never know which direction you're going, and we're still learning. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things and the biggest takeaways for me right now, that being able to listen into these on how we better manage these situations with these complex issues.
You talk about education and conversations you had with Lieutenants of Bravo back then, and it kind of relates to the fact that you place a lot of importance on educating the deputies and having them be able to identify mental illness. Why is that so important nowadays?
Well, there's a high expectation. Now there's so many more mentally ill people out in the community, living out in the streets, and they're homeless. And then there's substance abuse issues. So these become even more complex. So for us, we want to make sure that hopefully we can mitigate some of that substance abuse, get them to the providers and some of the services they need, and so that we don't have to deal with them in such a violent, sometimes violent situation, because they have all these things on board, like with drugs and these other things that they're facing. So those are the challenges. And so we want to make sure that we get them what they need, and we get them where they need to go, so they can be successful, and hopefully they can get out of this situation that they're in if that's being driven by mental illness or substance abuse.
And oftentimes substance abuse kind of fuels this situation, and it leads to, whether someone's coping with it, but what are some of the things that you can do and your department can do to prevent this in the community?
Education is probably one of the biggest. I believe trying to get out ahead of these things and trying to reach out to some of these families and working with our social workers. That's something that's very unique to our department. We have social workers in our command areas. Mm-hmm. And so to be able to hopefully draw them into there so they can get help to break the cycle, or get them help for that immediate need that they have then, and hopefully getting them some kind of plan put together to make them successful to live their lives with a certain level of quality in it.
Well, you know, at this time of the anniversary of Lieutenant Sabrava's death and your current involvement with the Presidential Commission, it must feel like maybe there's a bit of a deeper meaning for you, and that it kind of spurs you on to make sure that Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office does lead in this area when it comes to dealing with these kinds of challenges.
There is. I'm fully committed. We're continually finding ways to get people immersed into the community. We're coming out with a mobile community action team. We already have a community action team out there, but we're trying to do it county-wide in all these different areas that are sometimes a little bit harder to get to, like the Pajarito Mesa. So we're creating other ways to provide a better service, and then hopefully get people the help they need, the services they need, and make the community a lot better, and hopefully get them the services they need, more importantly.
On May 27, 1994, Lieutenant William Sabrava was shot and killed while attempting to serve an involuntary mental commitment order. While at the residence, the suspect opened fire, striking Lieutenant Sabrava twice, killing him. Lieutenant Sabrava had served with the department for 19 years and had planned to retire the following year. The Bernalillo County Emergency Communications Center has been named in Lieutenant Sabrava's honor.